This podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Bogosity. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. That's audibletrial.com/Bogosity. Welcome to the Bogosity podcast for the 10th of October 2016, the podcast that missed the left turn at Albuquerque. This is your host, Shane Killian, and joining me this week is Travis Retriever. Welcome back, Travis.
The Anarcho Puppy says hi.
First, a couple of announcements. I know we just came off a brief hiatus to Shoot the Woods talk, but I'm going to have to do it next week too. There should only be one more shooting day after that that'll preempt the podcast. I don't know when that's going to be because we haven't scored a location for it yet, but no podcast next week. Also, this will have already happened by the time the podcast is posted, but Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern, I will be joining Anarchy Ball in a debate with Sargon of Akkad. I'm not sure who else will be there, but please check that out. I hope I did a good job.
I got my fingers crossed for you, bro.
Now let's preempt the news of the bogus. We all know how government works. If it moves, tax it. If it keeps moving, regulate it. Although, more often than not, government jumps the gun coming in with regulations before it's even obvious that any are necessary. This happened with things like traffic lights. And of course, everyone is so convinced now that we need them despite all the evidence to the contrary, because if we don't, why would government have made them in the first place?
Because as we all know, government never does things that are unnecessary. Herder.
Modern case in point, autonomous vehicles, self-driving cars. After millions of driving miles, they're responsible for precisely 0 deaths, which is more than can be said for Ted Kennedy. Yes, he's dead and we're still making that joke deal with it. But there's just no way government can simply let an innovation be safe and even life-saving without getting their paws on it, so their disciples can give them credit for it later. They're not even properly out yet. The closest ones are vehicles like the Tesla Model S, which isn't actually autonomous but driver assist. But that didn't stop the NHTSA from making a rulebook governing the manufacture and safety of self-driving cars, not only severe restrictions, but also requirements to share tons of data with the federal government.
Speaking of Sargon of Akkad, I'm reminded of that bit you told, the rogue builders, etc., how, but without all these housing regulations, things would be horrible. And you point out that, funny how many of those houses that, those farmers built, for example, are still standing today. And, they just let GovCo get in, just a little bit, and then it keeps going a little more until people just get used to it, accustomed to it, and say, but without this, there'd be disasters without them. Same thing here. And that's not even taking into account the broken window effects of how many more innovations and how much better they would be without GovCo.
So, according to Jeff Zients, director of the White House's National Economic Council, quote, "We're envisioning a future where you can take your hands off the wheel and the wheel out of the car, and where your commute becomes productive and restful rather than frustrating and exhausting. No, it's people at Tesla and Google and places like that who are envisioning. You're envisioning getting your mitts into a technology where government is neither needed nor useful." Now, it's not that all of this is bad. There probably is a benefit to publicly sharing crash data, and their concerns on cybersecurity are well-founded. We've seen cars becoming hacked already, even without being fully autonomous, so security is absolutely a major issue here, but personally, I feel a lot better about standards from bodies like UL and IEEE than the heavy iron fist of government.
Yes, because whenever I think of standards and security and the like from GovCo, I think of the internet. That thing where they didn't separate the application session and
presentation.
Yeah, presentation layers. Something that still causes problems, including spam to this very day, because of their bogus force protocol, when there were plenty of good private ones readily available to be used.
Yeah, and people kept trying to use them, and they could use them on their local networks, but as soon as they used it over the public telephone system, the FCC stepped in and said, no, you have to use this one.
And hell, even on Cracked of all places, back when they were still good, I remember them pointing out these issues, like, with them assuming that all actors would be, all nice and good acting.
Well, you gotta remember, the people who first built it, it was like 20 people who all knew each other, and they were all friends, and they just wanted a way to connect with each other and be able to communicate reliably, and They weren't thinking about putting their personal banking information on it. So according to U.S. Transportation Secretary Anthony Fox, quote, "It's in their vested interest to be as upfront and clear and transparent as possible because there's market risk to putting a product out there that doesn't meet the expectations of the public." Okay, but that being the case, why do we need you? If it's in their vested interest, wouldn't they just do it automatically? And if the product doesn't meet the expectations of the public, won't they just refrain from buying them?
I'm reminded of a little bit from Tom Woods, how he pointed out, another obvious question made recently overlooked in this context is why a regulator with no financial stake in an enterprise would know better how to satisfy consumer demand than a business owner whose own wealth depends on getting it right. How superstitious can you get? Yeah, it's a bit of a long article, but a friggin' classic. I've read it at least half a dozen times, maybe more.
Now, the one manufacturer-versy that's been really mything me about driverless cars is the faux ethical concerns, and the document mentions specifically the idea, and you've heard this, where a driverless car has to make the decision between protecting the driver and protecting other people on the road. But I'm sorry, that's a lot of crap. I mean, let's say a driverless car makes a certain decision in such a situation. What would happen now if a human driver made that decision? Why should that be any different? I mean, it's just like they're reaching to find an excuse to regulate.
Really grasping for straws, it sounds like.
Well, and so many of them are edge cases anyway, and they come up with these wild scenarios. You know, what would a driverless car do then? Well, what would a human driver do then? That would have been a difficult situation for anyone. Mm-hmm. And it's also a nirvana fallacy because it's like, oh, well, you can't show that driverless cars are going to be perfect. Well, all they should have to show is that they're better than human drivers.
And so far, they've done that in spades.
Oh, yeah. But that's what government does. It steps in and regulates before the product is even out, before we have any chance of finding out realistically what the actual problems might be, if any. But who wants to bet 30 years down the road, people will be pointing to this as an example of why we need government regulations, because look at all the crazy things autonomous cars would have done without those regulations.
Translation. The sky is falling! The sky... Well, they might as well be saying that.
Yeah, it's just fear-mongering. Say, if you're tired of the promos in this podcast, well, the patrons got it early and with no ads or promos. Just go to patreon.bogosity.tv and donate at any level.
Hey everybody, this is Dave of the Superplex Bros, and you're listening to the Bogosity Podcast. When you're done, why don't you head over to superplexbros.com. We have all kinds of editorials and reviews on video games and pro wrestling. We're also currently hosting a major project called the Superplex Pokemon League, and we're about to go into our third season. We just had our actual draft, and we're going over all of the teams and their draft picks. So why don't you head on over there, check things out, and if you like, you can even check out the Superplex Brothers podcast, where Matt and I basically bullshit about video games, pro wrestling, or whatever the hell we want. Anyway, until next time, take care.
So we've covered problems with forensics before. While there is a lot of good science there, the fact is that the scientific method isn't really followed and is often even discouraged. So that gives it an element of pseudoscience and appearance of scientific accuracy when the actual science of that particular case is iffy at best. Well, now, the Department of Justice is finally addressing this issue in the wake of revelations of hundreds of flawed FBI forensic investigations, 28% of which resulted in death penalty verdicts.
Jesus!
Yeah. Now, there was an earlier attempt to examine this issue, but federal judge Jet S. Rakoff publicly resigned from the committee when he was told he wasn't actually supposed to be examining the issue at all. Quote, "Last evening, January 27, 2015, I was telephonically informed that the Deputy Attorney General of the U.S. Department of Justice has decided that the subject of pre-trial forensic discovery, i.e. the extent to which information regarding forensic science experts and their data, opinions, methodologies, etc., should be disclosed before they testify in court, is beyond the scope of the Commission's business and therefore cannot properly be the subject of Commission reports or discussions in any respect. Because I believe that this unilateral decision is a major mistake that is likely to significantly erode the effectiveness of the Commission, and because I believe it reflects a determination by the Department of Justice to place strategic advantage over a search for the truth, I have decided to resign from the Commission effective immediately. I have never before felt the need to resign from any of the many committees on which I have served over the years, but given what I believe is the unsupportable position now taken by the Department of Justice, I feel I have no choice. But now there's a report that suggests the DOJ may finally be taking these issues more seriously. They've issued a directive which says that they will, quote, ensure that forensic examiners are not using the expressions reasonable scientific certainty or reasonable forensic discipline certainty in their reports or testimony. Department prosecutors will abstain from use of these expressions when presenting forensic reports or questioning forensic experts in court. And the reason why is simply that there never was any reasonable scientific certainty to forensic examinations as they're commonly conducted. So one thing that they've relied on for many decades is fingerprints, and everyone considers a fingerprint match to be such a scientifically reliable way of matching a suspect to the crime he's committed. But in truth, effectively it's often no better than examining bite marks.
Funny you should mention this. Number 5 on this list from Cracked. What they basically say about that, yes, this is when Cracked was apparently actually good going against the zeitgeist. What happens is, it's true that fingerprints are unique, yada yada yada. However, that's only if you can get what is essentially a perfect or near-perfect sample. More often than not, you'll get things like smudges, wear from them, like if they've been away or on for a while, etc., to the point where it ends up inputting that amount of vagueness.
But it's even worse, according to Caleb Mason of Brown, White, and Osborne, quote, fingerprint examiners look for matching points in prints, but believe it or not, there are no general standards for which points to look at, how many points to look at, or even what counts as a point.
Wow, that is worse!
Yeah. Not only are there no established standards, there isn't even general agreement within the forensic analysis community. Some people like 8 points, others 10, others 12. Many examiners insist they can make an identification with just a single point.
Yes, but without the government, we wouldn't possibly have standards, and everyone will be flying with their standards all over the place. After all, that's why the most free market we have computers doesn't have stuff like universal serial. But oh wait.
But you can instantly see the problem if you're familiar with the concept of p-hacking. Like, okay, we want to prove something. You know, I'll use the jelly beans cause cancer thing. So we collect some data. We don't have a significant result. Okay, let's collect some more. We don't have a significant result. Oh, collect some more. Oh, look at that. We finally got a significant result. Let's publish.
So, you want to get the XKCD demonstration of that one, or should I?
You can look that one up, yeah, and we'll put it in the show notes. But, yeah, what they did in that one was they just tested 20 different colors, and they picked the one that came out. But what I'm talking about, and you see this a lot with, like, anti-GMO and anti-vaccine pseudoscience, they just collect the data until they get the result they want, and then they stop.
Yeah, pretty sure that any scientist doing that who wasn't in government would be not only fired, but most likely blacklisted, and rightly so.
Well, sadly, it happens a lot more often than you might think. But the point is, you have to state, starting out, this is how much data we're going to collect over this time period, and all that. Anything else is considered p-hacking. And that's what they're doing with these fingerprints.
I mean, it sounds like a kind of form of retrofitting or something like that.
It's not quite retrofitting, and it is something that can be done not deliberately, not maliciously, but just honestly thinking, you know, if you're not aware of the problems with p-hacking, then you might just be able to do it naively, but it's still bad.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that especially you'd want to be very rigorous and impartial, especially considering just how important stuff like this is. My God! I mean, we're talking about whether or not someone's going to be put behind bars, plus a 10% plus chance of being raped, and obliterating many of their career prospects in an economy that's not exactly doing strong to begin with.
Yeah. And Mason goes on, quote, even more amazingly, in stark contrast to DNA matching, no one knows what the statistical likelihood is of two fingerprints sharing particular points, or whether that likelihood is different for different regions or features of the print. This is the crucial question for any identification methodology, because while each person's fingerprints may be unique, the examiner doesn't look at every molecule. The examiner looks at whatever 5 or 8 or 10 points he or she chooses to look at.
God, discretion.
Well, I mean, you're sitting here being concerned about it. So are a lot of other people. So you would think that after all these decades, there'd be a lot of people doing examinations to actually determine all these likelihoods. But there's one reason why they haven't. They can't. According to Mason, quote, "The big fingerprint databases are controlled by DOJ, and DOJ has steadfastly refused to let researchers use them for the types of analyses geneticists do with DNA. That's what makes print analysis so frustrating. The data exists, so fingerprint analysis could be a genuine scientific discipline with publicly available databases, peer-reviewed research, known error rates, and accepted methodologies. It could be a real body of knowledge about the differential rates of occurrence among populations of particular physical features of our fingerprints. Hopefully, one day it will be, but it's not now, as the DOJ directives finally acknowledge."
Yeah, it only took them, 20, 50 years now? And yeah, and to the DOJ, as you would say to us, hey, what's the matter? I thought that if you have nothing to worry about or fear, you have nothing to hide. Dicks.
Well, at least they're doing it now. I mean, it's far from everything that needs to happen, but at least they're acknowledging the problems and coming right out and admitting that only people with a vested interest in prosecutions have been allowed to examine the data and methodology thus far, so hopefully this is just the beginning.
Grief. See, this is why you absolutely cannot have a monopoly on stuff like this.
Exactly.
I mean, good lord.
Well, science depends on being repeatable, but with a monopoly, the only people who can repeat it are the people who did it originally, and that's not quite what repeatable means. It means repeatable independently by other people who had nothing to do with the first one. Hackers, terrorists, the NSA. But I repeat myself. Your online security is under attack, and the weakest point is your password. That's why you need LastPass. LastPass plugs into your browser and allows you to randomly generate strong, unique passwords anywhere on the web, all protected by one master password. LastPass sets up in minutes and gives you secure automatic logins throughout the web, synchronizing across all your browsers and all your computers, at home, at work, or on the road. It even securely stores sensitive form data, including credit card numbers, backup sensitive documents, membership info, Wi-Fi logins, and more. And with LastPass Premium, you can get these benefits on other applications and even mobile devices, and also get priority customer support. Sign up at password.bogosity.tv for a free month of LastPass Premium. Log in securely everywhere using the last password you'll ever have to remember. Go to password.bogosity.tv and get LastPass now. So we now have the declassified 28 pages of the 9/11 Commission report confirming that Saudi Arabia was behind the 9/11 attacks and members of the Saudi royal family specifically funded it. That should allow the families of the victims to sue them for all sorts of reasons, including wrongful death, and get some restitution, and it would, except Obama has been trying to prevent it.
Shameful.
Both the House and the Senate passed S-2040 and H.R. 3815, the Justice Against Sponsors of Terrorism Act. It had 25 co-sponsors in the Senate and 61 in the House. They passed it, and Obama vetoed it.
So let's see, we have Obama basically playing good old boy with the Saudis, Hillary Clinton getting massive funding and favors from the Saudis, but, Democrats are totally the pro-peace candidates, am I right? Yeah, Jesus.
So after giving some meaningless platitudes about having sympathy for the families of the victims and having a strong desire to pursue justice, yeah, right, the president said that the bill would, quote, invite consequential decisions to be made based upon incomplete information and risk having different courts reach different conclusions about the culpability of individual foreign governments and their role in terrorist activities directed against the United States, which is neither an effective nor a coordinated way for us to respond to indications that a foreign government might have been behind a terrorist attack.
Well, I think my brain broke with the low signal-to-noise ratio on that. But what signal I was able to extract out of that, however tiny little it was Isn't that kind of an admission of the failure of government justice systems? Like, oh, well, we don't know how to, well, we can't coordinate them, there are too many standards, too many different, sounds like an admission of failure of the various justice systems monopolized by the states.
Well, regular listeners to the podcast shouldn't be at all surprised by the contempt Obama has for this country's judicial system. And after having more unanimous Supreme Court decisions made against him than any other president in history, it would seem the feeling is mutual.
Hey, Al.
Well, according to Mindy Kleinberg, who lost her husband on 9/11, quote, "I'm greatly disappointed. I would have liked him to stand with us. To come to this point where he's the one man standing between the way of justice and making the nation is horrifying. The facts are already so overwhelming. Saudi Arabia doesn't want to see this continue in the media or court. We're going to prevail. We are going to win. Either the Saudis will come to the table or we'll go to court and win there." And the good news here is the veto was overturned by Congress. The very first time they've overridden a veto by President Obama. The House voted 348 to 77 and the Senate 97 to 1 to override his veto, which is more than enough. Harry Reid was the one nay in the Senate, FYI, just in case you're wondering.
I don't know who that is, but I don't like him already.
Want to get $5 really quick? Just fire up your mobile device and go to Get5, that's GET numeral 5.bogosity.tv. By using this link to sign in to the Amazon app for the first time, or if it's been more than 12 months, you'll get $5 off your order of $10 or more. So what are you waiting for? Go to get5.bogosity.tv. Now you can make Amazon purchases with Bitcoin by going to purse.bogosity.tv. Save an average of 20% just by buying from Purse, or get even greater discounts by linking your Amazon wish list. Go to purse.bogosity.tv. Bogosity.tv is a participant in the Amazon Services LLC Associates program. Just clear your cookies and go to amazon.bogosity.tv, or check the right-hand side of the podcast page for Amazon's best deals. So next time you buy online, go to amazon.bogosity.tv. And now it's time to yank the pigtails of this week's biggest Bogon emitter. And this week it goes to HP Incorporated, which used to be part of Hewlett-Packard and now develops HP computers and printers. Cory Doctorow and the Electric Frontier Foundation sounded the alarm on a particularly horrendous piece of software in its OfficeJet Pro printers. HP pushed the software down as a critical security update, but it was anything but. What it actually did was stop people from using non-HP printer ink cartridges or from using refilled HP cartridges. If either of those are detected, the printer stops working completely.
Shameful. In
an open letter to HP, Dr. Rowe wrote, quote, "HP customers should be able to use the ink of their choosing in their printers for the same reason that Cuisinart customers should be able to choose whose bread goes in their toasters. The practice of tying is rightly decried by economists and competition regulators as an invitation to monopoly pricing and reduced competition and innovation. HP customers should choose HP ink because it is the best, not because their printer won't work with a competitor's brand."
Mm-hmm. If there's any one thing that's holding back the tech industry, well, I mean, aside from, the onerous government BS, like stuff that we've gone over, like SOPA and all that other crazy stuff, if there is something else that's really holding them back, it would be this IP bollocks. And yes, I can have another cracked article to link to, because, when it comes to stuff like this, they really know how to hit home.
Well, and this is just another form of DRM, that's all it is. So Dr. O says, quote, "By co-opting the security update mechanism to deliver an anti-feature, that is, something that works against your customer's interests, you have introduced doubt into the patch process. Earlier proof-of-concept malicious software targeted to your products, screened print jobs for social security numbers and credit card details, and sent them to attackers. or scanned customers' networks and hijacked their connected computers. By giving tens of millions of your customers a reason to mistrust your updates, you've put them at risk of future infections that could compromise their business and home networks, their sensitive data, and the gadgets that share their network with their printers, from baby monitors to thermostats. The software update that prevented the use of third-party ink was reportedly distributed in March, but this anti-feature itself wasn't activated until September. This means that HP knew for at least 6 months that some of its customers were buying your products because they believed they were compatible with any manufacturer's ink, while you had already planted a countdown timer in their property that would take this feature away. Your customers will have replaced their existing printers or made purchasing recommendations to friends who trusted them on this basis. They are now left with a less useful printer and possibly a stockpile of useless third-party ink cartridges.
But wait, something I saw that does not surprise me in the least. HP has posted a keep-out sign for security researchers. In using a technical countermeasure to exclude third-party cartridges, HP is signaling that it may invoke, you guessed it, the DMCA.
Yep.
God, this law sucks.
Yep, Section 1201 again.
Oh, joy. Can this law please die? And yeah, lest we forget, it was Clinton who signed it into law. Bill Clinton, not Hillary.
But I'm sure she's all in favor of it.
Oh, of course. She's queen of the corporations, lest we forget.
But Dr. O pointed out, quote, "This means that bad guys are free to exploit vulnerabilities in these products, while good guys are scared off from warning the people who depend on them about the dangers lurking in them. Given the history of attacks on printers and the widespread distribution of your products, this is the last thing you should want."
Indeed.
So all of that makes HP this week's biggest Bogon emitter. If you're on the Wi-Fi in a coffee shop or hotel, anyone on that network can get your traffic. Do you really trust all of those strangers? For that matter, do you really trust your ISP? A VPN can protect you from prying eyes, disguise your location, and even foil government censors. It's essential in this day and age, so go to vpn.bogosity.tv and you'll be taken to BoxPN. Starting at just $2.99 a month, you can get unlimited high-speed connections to VPN servers all over the world, and they don't log connections, so your privacy is assured. Traveling abroad, just VPN home, and don't worry about what those other governments are doing. Back at home, stop your ISP from traffic shaping and messing with the quality internet access you're paying good money for. You can connect from multiple machines at once, including your smartphone or tablet, and it supports all the secure standards, including OpenVPN and SSTP. Bypass censors and surveillance with your own secure VPN connection. Go to vpn.bogosity.tv. And now let's drop like a hot brick this week's
Idiot Extraordinaire.
Oh boy, and now we get to the one that had me cringing before we even hit record. Ugh.
Well, this week we're just going to say various conservatives because it's far more than just the ones at Conservative Review, although that's the one we're going to use to discuss the issue. Here's what they claim. Quote, "On September 30, the United States is poised to hand over control of the internet to the United Nations, following a years-long push by the Obama administration. If the handoff goes through, the U.S. will no longer have controlling power over its own invention. This process would be open to influence from countries like China, Russia, and Iran, which already actively censor the internet within their own borders."
Where do I even begin?
How about the fact that absolutely none of that is true?
And even if it was, it's a case of pot calling the kettle black. I mean, are you kidding me? With stuff like them shutting down sites, the DMCA, SOPA, and other stuff, I mean, that's not censoring? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I mean, they've been doing that anyway.
I mean, good lord. Hello? We've been dealing with that for decades now.
Well, the handoff in question was just the U.S. giving up some of the last remnants of control over the internet, and this is about ICANN, the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, which is now becoming a fully independent authority, and what's actually going to change is absolutely nothing at all.
Oh, good to know.
So there's not really much control that ICANN has over anything. What they do are maintain what's called root DNS servers. So you may have noticed when you connect to your ISP, you get your IP address and your subnet mask and your default gateway and stuff like that. And you also get a couple of IP addresses for DNS servers. This is where you look up a name like podcast.bogosity.tv and it turns it into an IP address. So what happens is your computer needs to turn that into an IP address. It goes to your ISP's DNS servers. And if they happen to have it cached, they can just give you the IP address. But if they need to do a lookup, then what they do is they go to ICANN servers, which run these root servers, and they say, hey, I've got something I need to look up under .tv. Now, this is the only thing ICANN does is those top-level domains. ICANN is going to say, oh, .tv, who manages those? Oh, VeriSign manages those. They also manage .com and a bunch of others. So you need to go to VeriSign servers over here to learn about .tv domains. And so then it goes over to VeriSign and it says, hey, VeriSign, I'm looking for information on Bogosity.tv. And VeriSign goes, oh, Bogosity.tv, yeah, that's over at GoDaddy. And so then it goes over to GoDaddy's DNS servers and says, I need the IP address for podcast.bogosity.tv. And GoDaddy says, okay, here you go, and then you can connect. And all this happens quickly and seamlessly in the background. But notice that the only part ICANN plays is in figuring out who manages those top-level domains. So the only thing that's changing here is that the Department of Commerce no longer has oversight over ICANN, but then they never really had that much control over it anyway, and there's not really that much ICANN can do. And I mean, what are they afraid? They're talking about blocking off websites. Well, if they wanted to block off Bogosity.tv, ICANN can't do that. They don't have access to that. The only thing they can do is shut off all .tv domains or all .com domains.
And good luck with that.
Yeah, but I don't even know where they get the idea that the UN has absolutely nothing to do with this whatsoever.
I think it's just fear-mongering.
Yeah.
Let's be real here. Many conservatives actually don't like the UN as well, for various reasons, some warranted, some not. So I think it's just, putting in buzzwords to get them to think, oh, we don't want that, that's bad, we want it to be controlled by our government in America, not those foreign, silly, sissy Europeans, herpader, or some such bollocks.
But really, the only things ICANN can do that are bad are nothing, or something so horrendous that it would affect major parts of the internet and get everyone turning against them. And all it would mean is just someone else setting up a competitor to ICANN and say, hey, point your DNS servers through me instead. We won't do that crap. I mean, if ICANN tried to do anything like that, they'd instantly lose control. They require the cooperation of the entire internet community to work.
One of the many things that's so great about the internet, people look and say, oh, well, it's Wild West. Oh, it's decentralized with no central yeah, and that's a good thing. Folks, that is a good thing.
Yep. I mean, it has its consequences, like people can say mean things about you online and...
Boo-hoo.
Yeah.
And even if it does get too much for that, there are block buttons, there are mute buttons, there are report buttons for that.
I like the way John Perry Barlow put it. We cannot separate the air that chokes from the air upon which wings beat.
True that.
And that's why all of these conservatives are this week's
Idiot Extraordinaire.
Well, that wraps up this Druids on Parade edition of the Bogosity podcast. Come join the discussion at forum.bogosity.tv and feel free to join in by sending a question, statement, news article, or rant in text or audio to podcast@bogosity.tv. This podcast depends on you to keep going, so please donate using the links on the website or the QR codes in the thumbnail, or become a patron at patreon.bogosity.tv and get the podcast and YouTube videos early and without ads or promos. Thank you for listening, and thanks to Travis Retriever for joining me.
It was a blast. And to those who are in Hurricane Matthew's way, stay safe.
Remember, no podcast next week, so we'll be back in 2 weeks. Until then, here's a quote from Bryan Lunduke. If it ain't broke, don't fix it is the stupidest freaking saying in the world. All of the amazing things that have happened throughout human history is because someone decided to take something that they thought was working fine, break it, and build something better. The Bogosity podcast is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License.
Bogosity.
Want answers to creationist claims against evolution? Would you like to know more about evolution yourself, or even engage creationists more directly, with actual peer-reviewed sources to back you up? My book, How Evolution is Scientific, is designed to show the basics of evolutionary theory and how it is so well supported using the scientific method. It's impeccably sourced, with references to the actual scientific material, and is arranged using the creationists' own criteria of what is scientific. Using their own arguments against them, see how evolution is scientific, but creationism is not, based on observations, accurate predictions, logic, and evidence. Get answers to common creationist claims, and even a primer on abiogenesis, the start of all life. It's all in my book, How Evolution is Scientific, available at Amazon and on Kindle, EPUB, and PDF as well. Get How Evolution is Scientific and never be taken in by creationists again.
It's also forced updates for Microsoft Windows 10 and other such bollock nagware, which is why whenever I have to do an update for Windows, I'll actually try to get the name of the update and actually Google it to see what if I'm gonna put in my computer is going to make it happy or make it take a dump.
Yeah, but they've changed the way it works. So, and I'm kind of got mixed feelings about this. Instead of giving you a whole bunch of updates on Patch Tuesday, they're kind of lumping it all together into one.
Well, they don't do that still on Microsoft's Windows 7.
Okay.
I know I stayed with them for a reason.
But, I mean, I can totally see the idea why, because if you're doing patched updates, you don't want to figure out, like, how many thousands of possible different patch configurations people might have and trying to make it work with all of them. So I can totally see that.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I've had specific patches that hosed my system, and I'd like to be able to go and say, okay, don't ever install this patch again. I've had to do that a few times.
Which is the reason I do it that way. Other than a double middle finger pointed at HP, as well as me considering not buying one of their printers again after this.
Yeah, I've been telling people not to buy anything HP for years. They've just been terrible for quite a long time.
Yeah, and I can see why. Holy crap. So any printer recommendations you would recommend?
Get a color laser. I got 10 years ago, it's a Brother, I can't really see it from here, MFC 5440, something like that. And it's a printer, scanner, fax machine, although who uses fax machines anymore, but it's one of those all-in-one things. It was like $300 or $400. The toner, the 4-toner cartridges for all the colors is like $150, and I've only had to change it twice in the last 10 years. That is way cheaper than buying ink cartridges, and it's superior quality. Get yourself a color laser.